September 14th, 1942. 23:47 hours. Atlantic Ocean, 47 miles southeast of New York Harbor. Captain Lieutenant Hans Werner Krauss stood in the conning tower of U-552, his Zeiss binoculars scanning the black Atlantic horizon. The submarine had been submerged for 16 hours, running on battery power, evading American destroyers that had been hunting them since dawn. Now, with batteries nearly depleted and air growing foul, he had no choice but to surface and run the diesels. "Surface the boat," Krauss ordered. "All lookouts to the bridge. Prepare to run diesels." Radio silence maintained. The U-boat broke surface with a hiss of compressed air and cascade of seawater. Krauss climbed through the hatch, breathing deeply of clean Atlantic air after hours of the submarine's oppressive atmosphere that smelled of diesel fuel, unwashed men, and fear. His crew of 48 had been at sea for 63 days, operating off the American coast, sinking Allied shipping in what the U-boat crews called the second happy time. U-552 had been successful. 11 ships sunk, totaling 63,000 tons. Krauss was an ace, one of Admiral Donit's most effective commanders. He understood submarine warfare intimately, knew how to hunt convoys, how to evade destroyers, how to survive in the most dangerous waters of the war. But tonight, September 14th, 1942, Captain Lieutenant Hans Werner Krauss was about to see something that would fundamentally shatter his understanding of the war Germany was fighting. Something that would make him question every briefing, every propaganda broadcast, every assurance from Berlin about America's weakness. He was about to discover that Germany had already lost the war. They just didn't know it yet. Course, Krauss asked his navigator. 270, Hercule, running southwest, away from the coast. We should be clear of patrol zones within 4 hours. Good. Run one diesel for battery charging, the other for propulsion. We maintain. Hercule, the port lookout's voice was sharp. Bearing 330. On the horizon. I see lights. Many lights. Krauss swung his binoculars northwest. What he saw made no sense. The horizon glowed. Not the glow of fire or searchlights. Not the focused beams of a hunting destroyer. The entire northwestern horizon, where the American coastline lay 47 miles distant, blazed with light. Thousands of lights. Millions of lights. A constellation of illumination so vast and bright that it reflected off the low cloud cover, creating an artificial dawn at midnight. "What is that?" the starboard lookout breathed. It looks like cities. Multiple cities. All lit up." Krauss adjusted his binoculars, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. He'd operated off the American coast for 2 months. He'd seen cities at night. Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore. All of them had been dark, blacked out according to coastal defense regulations that every nation at war implemented. Berlin had been dark since 1939. London was dark. Every European city lived in darkness, afraid of bombers that used lights for navigation. But what Krauss was seeing now wasn't a city. It was a region. 50 miles of coastline blazing with electric light, as if there was no war, no U-boats, no threat at all. As if America simply didn't care that German submarines prowled their waters. "It's New York," his first watch officer, Oberleutnant zur See Wilhelm Hartmann, said quietly. He'd joined Krauss on the bridge, staring at the impossible sight. "And New Jersey, and Connecticut, the entire metropolitan area. Hercule, they're not blacked out. They're not dimmed. They're fully illuminated." "That's impossible," Krauss replied. "No nation at war leaves coastal cities lit. Bombers use city lights for navigation. U-boats use them for positioning. It's suicide." "Yet there it is," Hartmann said. "Millions of lights. Like they don't even acknowledge we exist." Krauss made a decision that would change his understanding of everything. "Helm, come to 330. Make turns for 8 knots. We approach for observation." "Hercule." Hartmann's voice carried concern. "We're approaching American coastal waters. With cities that bright, their coastal defenses will see us easily." "I'm aware, but I need to understand what we're seeing. Admiral Donitz needs to know. If the Americans are leaving their cities lit while we operate in their waters, either they're incompetent or—" He trailed off. "Or," Hartmann prompted, "or they simply don't care. And if they don't care, there's a reason we need to understand." For 90 minutes, U-552 ran on the surface, moving slowly toward the American coast. As they approached, the lights grew brighter, more defined. Individual buildings became visible. Street lights in perfect grids. Automobile headlights moving on roads. Harbor lights. Factory lights. Residential lights. Everything illuminated as if peace reigned and no German submarine could possibly threaten them. At 14 miles from the coast, Krauss could see details that made his trained submariner's mind struggle with contradictions. Through his binoculars, he observed Brooklyn, entire neighborhoods blazing with streetlights. Not dimmed, not masked, full peacetime illumination. Manhattan, the skyline visible in sharp detail, lit by thousands of windows and skyscrapers that towered higher than anything in Europe. Each building outlined in light. New Jersey industrial areas. Factories running night shifts, their lights blazing. He could see workers moving in illuminated loading docks. Cranes operating under floodlights. Ships being loaded in harbors lit like daylight. The Statue of Liberty, torch illuminated, visible from 14 miles at sea. Mein Gott, Hartmann whispered. They're not even trying to hide. They're operating at full capacity, in the middle of the night, while we're in their waters. Krauss lowered his binoculars slowly. His submarine had sunk 11 ships in these waters. He'd sent 63,000 tons of Allied shipping to the bottom. In the darkness, hunting by moonlight and the dim glow of poorly masked running lights. And the entire time, just over the horizon, American cities had been blazing with enough light to read a newspaper at midnight. Hercule, the radio operator's voice came through the speaking tube, monitoring American commercial radio broadcasts. They're discussing production numbers. A Liberty ship was launched today in New Jersey. The announcer says it's the 14th Liberty ship launched this month from East Coast shipyards alone. 14 ships in 1 month. From East Coast yards alone. U-552 had taken 63 days to sink 11 ships. America was building ships faster than the entire U-boat fleet could sink them. Continue monitoring, Krauss ordered. His mind was racing, making calculations that terrified him. At 8 miles from the coast, close enough that American shore batteries could engage them if spotted, Krauss made a decision. Dive the boat. Take her to periscope depth. I need to observe more carefully. U-552 submerged smoothly, years of crew training making the evolution routine. At periscope depth, Krauss put his eye to the attack periscope, the better optics allowing him to see details that would haunt him. He observed the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Dozens of ships under construction. Cranes working under floodlights. 3 aircraft carriers visible in various stages of completion. In Germany, building a single carrier was a project that consumed years and resources. Here, he was looking at 3 under construction simultaneously in one shipyard. He observed Newark Airport. Aircraft landing and taking off at midnight. Civilian aircraft. In Germany, all civilian aviation had ceased in 1940, every resource directed to military production. Here, Americans were flying commercial routes while their nation was at war. He observed the New Jersey Turnpike. Automobiles. Hundreds of automobiles, driving at night with headlights on, as if gasoline rationing didn't exist. In Germany, civilian automobile ownership had effectively ceased. Fuel was military priority only. Here, Americans were driving personal vehicles for leisure while their nation fought on 2 fronts. Hercule, Hartmann's voice was quiet. I've been calculating what we're observing. The electrical consumption alone, to light cities this size, this brightly, requires generating capacity that exceeds Germany's entire electrical grid. And this is just one metropolitan area. Intelligence briefings said America had electrical shortages, that their infrastructure was failing. Intelligence briefings, Krauss said slowly, appear to have been optimistic. He continued his periscope observations, and each thing he saw was a piece of a puzzle that was forming a terrifying picture. Port Newark. Ships loading cargo under floodlights. He counted 47 cargo vessels in various stages of loading. 47 ships, in one port, loading simultaneously. Hamburg, Germany's largest port, could handle maybe 12 ships at once. Factory districts in New Jersey. Lights blazing from hundreds of buildings. Night shift workers visible moving between buildings. Production continuing 24 hours a day. Admiral Donitz had told his U-boat commanders that American industry was struggling to meet wartime demands. What Krauss was seeing suggested American industry was operating at levels Germany couldn't match. Railway yards, trains moving, dozens of trains carrying cargo operating at night. The German railway system had been bombed so heavily that night operations were nearly impossible. Here, Americans ran freight trains at midnight like it was peacetime. "Take her down to 100 meters, Krauss ordered. "Silent running. We need to discuss what we've observed." In the cramped wardroom, Krauss gathered his officers. First Watch Officer Hartmann. Second Watch Officer Lieutenant Zur C. Friedrich Koch. Chief Engineer Oberleutnant ING. Klaus Weber. Navigator Lieutenant Zur C. Martin Schultz. These were professionals, veterans, men who'd survived multiple patrols in the most dangerous waters. "Gentlemen," Krauss began, "we need to discuss what we've seen tonight and what it means for this patrol, for the U-boat war, and for Germany. What we've seen," Engineer Weber said slowly, "is impossible according to everything we've been told. Berlin assured us that American industry was struggling, that their electrical grid was overtaxed, that coastal cities would be blacked out like European cities. Instead, we observe a metropolitan area operating at what appears to be full peacetime capacity while conducting a two-front war. Let me share some calculations." Navigator Schultz spread papers on the wardroom table. "I've been making observations and doing mathematics. The New York metropolitan area contains approximately 12 million people. The area we observed illuminated covers roughly 3,000 square kilometers. The electrical consumption required to light that area at the intensity we observed would require generating capacity of approximately 1,500 megawatts. Germany's entire electrical generating capacity in 1941 was estimated at 20,000 megawatts. One American metropolitan area is consuming 8% of Germany's total electrical capacity just for lighting, while maintaining full industrial production, while operating a two-front war." The officers sat in silence, processing this information. "That can't be right," Koch said finally. "If it were true, it would mean American industrial capacity exceeds ours by what factor?" "I don't know," Schultz admitted. 10 times? 20? "I can't calculate it because I don't know what their total capacity is. But gentlemen, we observed one city. America has dozens of major cities, hundreds of industrial centers. If they all operate at this level, we've already lost," Hartmann finished. "We've lost, and we don't know it yet." "That's defeatism," Koch snapped. "Our orders are clear. We hunt enemy shipping. We sink tonnage. We contribute to the tonnage war. If we sink more than they can build, they're building faster than we can sink." Krauss interrupted quietly. The radio operator heard an announcement. 14 Liberty ships launched in 1 month from East Coast yards alone. "We sank 11 ships in 63 days. At best, the entire U-boat fleet might sink 200 ships per month. If American East Coast yards alone are launching 14 per month, and they have yards on the Gulf Coast, the West Coast, the Great Lakes, gentlemen, they're outbuilding our sinking rate significantly." "U-boat command says we sank 800,000 tons last month," Koch protested. "And they built how much?" Weber asked. "We receive sinking reports. We don't receive building reports. We don't know their construction rates because Berlin doesn't tell us." "Why?" "Because if we knew the truth, we'd understand what Captain Krauss just said. We've already lost." Krauss stood, pacing the cramped wardroom. "We've been operating under assumptions that tonight proved false. We assumed American cities would be dark. They're fully lit. We assumed American industry was struggling. It's operating at capacity we can't match. We assumed Americans were afraid of U-boats. They're leaving lights on that guide us to targets. Why? Either they're incompetent, or they're not afraid," Hartmann finished. "They're not afraid because they know something we're just discovering. Their capacity to build exceeds our capacity to destroy. They can absorb losses we can't sustain. They're fighting a different war, an industrial war. And in an industrial war, the side with more factories wins. We should surface and transmit a report to BDU," Koch suggested. "Admiral Donitz needs this intelligence." "And say what?" Krauss asked. "That we observed American cities fully lit and concluded we can't win? That message would get me relieved of command and investigated for defeatism. No, we complete the patrol. We sink our tonnage. We return to Loya. And then I will write a detailed report about what we observed and what it means. What Captain Lieutenant Krauss didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that his observations that night were accurate. America's industrial capacity had reached levels that made German production seem artisanal by comparison. Between January and September 1942, American shipyards had launched 597 merchant ships. In the same period, U-boats had sunk 609 ships. But the trend lines were diverging. American production was accelerating. U-boat effectiveness was plateauing. By year's end, American shipyards would launch over 700 ships while U-boat sinkings would remain at approximately 1,000 ships. But the critical fact was capacity expansion. American shipyards in September 1942 were producing ships in facilities that had been farmland in December 1941. Henry Kaiser's Richmond shipyard in California had gone from dirt to launching Liberty ships in 147 days. Germany couldn't build shipyard facilities that quickly, let alone ships. The lights that Krauss observed represented something more fundamental than electricity consumption. They represented an economy operating at full capacity without strain. German factories ran night shifts because they had to, because they were desperately trying to meet production goals with limited resources. American factories ran night shifts because they could, because they had excess capacity, unlimited resources, and workers to spare. U-552 continued its patrol for another 19 days. Krauss sank 2 more ships, bringing his total to 13. But the joy of successful attacks was gone. Every ship he sank, he thought about the lights of New York. Every tonnage report he received, he thought about 14 Liberty ships launched in a month. On October 3, 1942, U-552 returned to Loria. Krauss submitted his patrol report, including a detailed description of what he'd observed off New York. The response from BDU was brief. Observations noted. Maintain operational focus. Do not discuss with crew. But Krauss did discuss it. With other U-boat commanders. In quiet conversations in the officers' mess. Away from superiors who might report defeatist talk. And he discovered he wasn't alone. Corvettenkapitän Reinhard Hardigan, commander of U-123, had observed similar phenomena off New York in January 1942. The entire coast was lit like Christmas, Hardigan told Krauss over schnapps in the officers' club. I thought it was a trap. Some elaborate deception to draw us into coastal waters. Then I realized it wasn't deception. They simply didn't care. They were operating as if we didn't exist. That's when I understood. They're not afraid of us. They're annoyed by us. Like mosquitoes. Irritating, but not threatening. Captain Lieutenant Eric Topp, ace commander of U-552, shared his own observations. I've been calculating tonnage ratios. We receive reports of ships sunk, but we don't receive reports of ships built. I started monitoring American commercial radio. They announce ship launches like they're announcing sports scores. Another Liberty ship launched today, the 4th this week from this yard. The 4th this week. From one yard. And they have dozens of yards. Hundreds. We're not winning the tonnage war. We're losing badly. We just don't have accurate numbers. By late 1942, a quiet understanding was spreading among U-boat commanders. The war they'd been told they were winning, they were actually losing. The enemy they'd been told was weak was actually strong. The industrial capacity they'd been assured was limited was actually overwhelming. In January 1943, U-boat losses began to accelerate. American destroyer escorts, mass-produced in the same shipyards that built Liberty ships, were entering service by the dozens. Escort carriers, built on merchant hulls, were providing air cover in mid-Atlantic. Radar, which Germany had dismissed as primitive American technology, was proving devastatingly effective at detecting surfaced U-boats. The happy time was over. Now came the dying time. Captain Lieutenant Hans Werner Krauss survived until May 1943. U-552 was sunk by British aircraft north of Cape Ortegal while attempting to transit the Bay of Biscay. 47 of his 48 crew died. Krauss survived, was picked up by a British destroyer, became a prisoner of war. In the POW camp in Canada, Krauss met American officers for the first time. During one informal conversation, he asked the question that had haunted him since September 14, 1942. Why did you leave your cities lit? You knew we were in your waters. You knew lights helped us navigate, helped us position targets. Why give us that advantage? The American naval officer, a destroyer captain who'd spent 2 years hunting U-boats, smiled. Lights? We didn't think about the lights. We had more important things to worry about, like building ships faster than you could sink them, like building destroyers faster than you could torpedo them, like building aircraft faster than you could shoot them down. Lights were a civilian issue, handled by local governments who decided blackouts weren't necessary. We were too busy building the ships and planes and weapons to win the war to worry about whether some lights might help U-boats that we were going to sink anyway. But the submarines, Krauss protested. We sank hundreds of ships in your waters, thousands of tons, and we built them back, the American replied. Faster than you sank them. By 1943, we were launching 3 ships for every one you sank. By 1944, 5 for 1. You were fighting an enemy that could absorb losses faster than you could inflict them. The lights weren't arrogance, Captain. They were irrelevance. Whether the lights were on or off didn't matter because the outcome was already determined by production capacity. You were fighting mathematics. And mathematics doesn't care about tactics. After the war, Krauss returned to Germany. He never commanded another vessel. He became a shipping insurance assessor, a job that let him use his nautical knowledge without commanding men to their deaths. He married in 1948, had 3 children, lived quietly in Hamburg. In 1965, a naval historian interviewed him about his wartime experiences. The historian asked about his most significant patrol. Krauss didn't mention the ships he'd sunk, the tonnage figures, the successful attacks. September 1942, Krauss said, "We surfaced 47 miles off New York, and I saw the entire coastline lit up like peacetime. Millions of lights. Factories running night shifts. Ships loading under floodlights. Trains running. Cars driving with headlights on. And I realized we'd already lost the war. We'd lost it not because of tactics or courage or technology. We'd lost it because we were fighting an industrial power that could operate at full peacetime capacity while fighting a two-front war. They left the lights on because they didn't care about U-boats. They were building ships faster than we could sink them. And that night, I understood what that meant. We were losing. We'd always been losing. We just didn't know it until we saw the lights." "Did you report this to your superiors?" the historian asked. "I submitted a patrol report. It was noted and filed. Nobody wanted to hear that we were losing. It's easier to believe you're winning when you count ships sunk and ignore ships built. But mathematics doesn't care about belief. The side that can build 3 ships for every 1 sunk wins. It's that simple." And that night, seeing those lights, I understood the mathematics finally. "When did you decide to surrender?" the historian asked. Krauss looked surprised. "I didn't surrender in September 1942. We completed the patrol, sank 2 more ships, returned to base, went back out on another patrol. I survived until May 1943 when my boat was sunk. I was captured, not surrendered." "But the interview title says you surrendered after seeing the lights." "Mentally," Krauss said quietly. "Mentally, I surrendered that night. I understood we couldn't win. But I was a German naval officer. I had orders. I had a crew depending on me. So I continued fighting a war I knew we'd lost. That's what soldiers do. We follow orders even when we know they're pointless. Because the alternative is chaos. But in my mind, from September 14th, 1942 onward, I knew the outcome. We'd already lost. The lights told me that. America's industrial capacity told me that. The mathematics told me that. Did other U-boat commanders feel the same? Many of us, Krauss admitted. We didn't talk about it openly. That would have been defeatism, possibly treason. But in quiet conversations, we shared our observations. American production capacity, British code breaking, radar effectiveness, the mathematics. By 1943, most experienced commanders understood we were losing the tonnage war badly. But we continued fighting because that's what naval officers do. We followed orders. We did our duty. And we died in increasing numbers because Germany was fighting an industrial war with insufficient industry. The historian asked one final question. If you could go back to September 14th, 1942, what would you have done differently? Krauss thought for a long moment. I would have surfaced closer to New York. Close enough to see individual buildings. Close enough to count factory lights and shipping cranes and railway yards. Close enough to truly understand the scale of what we were fighting. Because from 47 miles, I saw enough to know we'd lost. But I didn't see enough to understand the magnitude of our defeat. I saw lights. I should have seen the industrial power behind those lights. The shipyards building Liberty ships in weeks. The aircraft factories producing bombers by the thousands. The resource extraction and transportation networks feeding those factories. The financial systems supporting unlimited production. I saw the symptom. I should have understood the disease. What disease? Industrial inferiority. Krauss said simply. Germany was fighting an industrial war with an economy that couldn't sustain industrial warfare. America was fighting an industrial war with the world's largest industrial economy operating at full capacity. That's not a war. That's mathematics. And we lost the moment we declared war on an enemy whose production capacity exceeded ours by factors we didn't understand. Captain Lieutenant Hans Werner Krauss died in 1987 at age 73. His obituary mentioned his wartime service, his 13 ship kills, his survival of U-552's sinking. It didn't mention September 14, 1942, the night he saw the lights of New York and understood that Germany had already lost a war they didn't know they were losing. But among naval historians, the story became legend. The U-boat commander who saw America's lights and understood. The professional warrior who recognized that tactics couldn't overcome industrial capacity. The man who fought for 2 more years knowing the outcome was predetermined by production statistics. The lights of New York still burn, brighter now than in 1942, but they represent the same thing they represented that September night. Industrial capacity, economic strength, the ability to operate at full capacity while absorbing losses that would cripple other nations. Krauss saw those lights and understood. Germany was fighting mathematics, and mathematics always wins.